I met Keith a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and he's become a good friend of mine. And we see each other more on Zoom than we do in person, but that's the world we live in these days. Keith is not only a really smart guy, he's doing some really interesting stuff. He's a real pioneer with this 100-year-old brand, and he started with NFTs of covers. He's built a massive community, but that's just the start of Keith. You can't keep him down. He is like that beach ball. The beach ball that you can't keep down, that will come up in the interview, is he's doing everything, and he sees everything and meets all sorts of extraordinary people. And where this Web3 world is going, Keith is one of the best people in the world who knows it at a broad level. So I absolutely love speaking to him, and it's always good fun. Keith Grossman, always a pleasure, my friend. How are you?
It is wonderful to see you, my friend.
So just before we get cracking into whatever the hell we're going to talk about, because we've no idea, just give people a bit of background of what you do. I know you're pretty well known already, but just in case people don't.
Sure. So my name is Keith Grossman. I'm the president of Time. I've been at Time for about 3.5 years. And in my capacity, really been focused on how do we evolve the brand for the next 100 years. And in the past year or so, been focusing primarily on furthering Time's Web3 agenda. And, we took Time into Web3 almost 2 years ago at this point, which is crazy when you think about it. But during that time, we've evolved from one-of-one sales to accepting cryptocurrency for digital subscriptions to, creating a community of nearly 60,000 members and 89 timepiece artists. And so, today we have 3 businesses that touch the Web3 business. It's the consumer-facing business, which we call Timepieces. We have what's called blockchain to big screen, which is looking at great IP that's being developed within the Web3 space. And we could talk about that, right? Because, there's no, I would say, traditional gatekeepers saying this is great IP or not. You're seeing communities vote with dollars. And we turn those into television shows. And we currently have 2 in production with Nelvana, with Pablo Stanley and Will Lee. And then the final is our B2B business, which is helping other brands and organizations enter into Web3. And you saw that with the city of Miami and Francis Suarez, and what we're doing with Salesforce and Mastercard. And then you also saw it recently with Galaxy Digital, who I know you know Mike very well, Raoul. And then we have a few others to be announced.
So, okay, you've moved on fast since when I last spoke to you. This is what worries me, is you're moving at bloody lightning speed. I'm trying to catch up. So, right, let's go through the consumer product first, because that's what people were familiar with. Where are you with that? What's going on? Where are you going? And then we'll go through the other lines in a bit, and then we'll get into some general stuff.
Of course. So look, I mean, I think that for any brand, right, whether it's Time or Real Vision or others, like you want to think about, what's your audience and who's your community, right? And both are very important, right? But the reality is like an audience shows up and engages for a moment, and a community wants to stay around and build and really wants to engage deeply with your brand. Audience is great for reach, right? But community is really important for, I would say, sustaining power, right? Long-term sustaining power. And what I find with Web3 in particular, as it relates to media brands, is that it gives you the opportunity to activate a community, whereas you may traditionally just have an audience, right? So if you think about Web2 and earlier relationships with media brands, take Time. We were, before this started recording, talking about sort of global economic trends. If you're interested in that topic and you search for something, perhaps you see an article written by Ian Bremmer, who's a contributing writer for Time. You see that it's Ian Bremmer, you see it's the topic that you want, you see it's Time, you trust, you like, and it's, aligned with your interests. You click on it, you read it, and then you leave. And that's what an audience is, right? And that's usually what most people's relationship is with brands, right? What a community does, though, instead is a community shows up every day, right? A community wants to build. A community says, have you considered doing this? A community says, why aren't you doing that? A community is not always positive, right? But a community's negativity is really constructive. And, I didn't really notice the difference between community and audience until I was at Wired and Ars Technica early in my career. And I saw that Wired had mass reach on an audience, but Ars Technica had a really strong community, people who would constantly be reinforcing each other and helping each other and fixing each other. And that community created a really powerful brand. And what I see with Web3 is, by extension, you have that ability to tap into an identified community. And so with timepieces, what's really interesting is timepieces is just 60,000 people, right, in a community today, whereas time holistically reaches about 100 million people. And it shows you how early we are, right? That 60,000 people in the first year essentially generated $10 million in profit for the organization. But over here, when you look at the organization's about 100 million people a month, right, in terms of audience reach. And so you realize, like, the larger the community can become, the stronger the community can become, the more engaged the community can become, the better it is for the brand, I think, long term. And the better it is for the brand from a health perspective economically. And so for timepieces, like right now, we are currently working on our next drop. I'm really excited about sort of where it's going. Every single drop we've ever done has been sort of an iteration on where we're seeing the marketplace go. I'm not at the point where I could discuss where it is, but I can say it's fully interactive, fully decentralized, and very immersive.
And what are the economics involved in doing something like this? What does the community get out of it? How does it work for time? Because it's the one thing I love about Web3, it's very open, right? Everybody kind of knows what's what. So how does it work that it feels like everybody's participating in something?
Sure. So I think, like, let's start with the economics of just the relationship between the creator and the brand, right? Because it's all public, right? If you look at the economics of like the traditional publishing industry, take something like this, right? And I just happen to have it within one.
Because I happen to have that NFT as well, right? I bought that.
Right? Okay. So I love this cover, right? Here you have Micah Johnson, a coup, like literally one of the most well-known, Web3 creators. When Micah did the cover of Time, right, he was paid a stipend, which is what you pay sort of the artists to do the cover. And the stipend, let's just say, was X. And Time now owns the rights to this cover forever, right, in its current iteration. For the NFT, though, we do what we always do with everything. First, 1% goes to charity, right? And then the remainder was split evenly between Time and Micah Johnson, right? And when we actually produced this as an NFT, it did close to $400,000 in sales, right? And he did. So, like, right when this was done, like, I was able to, with the team, transfer nearly $200,000 to Micah Johnson, right? And you start to look at it and you say, okay, so the relationship between the brand and the creator all of a sudden changes dramatically, right? And that's all on chain, right? So people could see that, right? Whatever the amount was, we essentially split it evenly after we give the 1% to charity. And we've done that for timepieces. And, in the past year, we've been able to donate $600,000 to charity, right? Which has been amazing. We've donated it to either, humanitarian aid in Ukraine, or to democratic free press organizations. Like, the idea of warm crypto, and I think that it's a really important topic, I think is a great onboarder of people into Web3. You remember I shared with you the other day, I was doing something for New York Cares. I raised nearly $200,000, by myself for New York Cares through a NFT drop. But then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so what does the community get out of it, right? Now, like, we do not look at these token drops and say they are X value, Y value. We say we believe that they're worth X or Y, and if you want them, they're up to you, and we let the marketplace determine value at its own discretion. But what we do is we say, okay, here are different things that provide unique experiences, right, or access to certain areas. So, like we token gate our community. If you allow certain parts of our community, if you have a timepiece token in your wallet, you can connect it to time.com and remove the paywall. Person of the Year is coming up in December. We'll have raffles where if you own timepieces, you'll be able to gain access to potentially attending Person of the Year, right, in that event. We do special talks with certain people that we only allow accessible to people who own timepiece tokens. And, more than anything else, we try to always partner with great artists and come up with creative ideas. So that way people can.
As we've talked about in the past, time, even the name alone, the covers have been known as a period in time. That's why the moment that Aku piece came out, I immediately had to buy it because it was important. Now, whether it has monetary value or not to me is irrelevant. It's because it was a moment in time, because I know you, I know what you're doing, I know Micah, and I just think it was a moment in time that was really important for everybody in Web3. And so I just wanted to own it. And, I love that. And now whether it goes up or down in price, I've never even checked it, not once.
Oh, I love that. I mean, I love that, right? And that's the goal, right? And that's why I think it's important, right? For us, when we uplift great artists, right, with the Time brand, like we want to validate the artists with the brand, and the brand also gets validated by the artists through their community. And I think that one of the things that we've been very, very, very focused on is being a values-based community, which I've spoken about at length, especially even with you. And not being a greed-based community, right? And so, I don't look at floor prices. I don't look at things like that. I look at making sure that people have pieces that they just look and cherish and love, right? And, have staying power.
How does Time make money out of that? If all of the money goes to charity, goes to the artist, sure, etc.
So the first 1% of primary and secondary sales goes to charity, right? And then the remaining 99% is split evenly between creators and Time, right? So Time makes money as part of the secondary.
On
the primary, right? So
right.
If we split it evenly, right, it goes 1% goes to charity, and then the remaining 99% is split between the artist and Time.
Right, get it. And how the hell do you account for it?
Oh my God.
We're trying to think about this because our NFT community now is worth like $20 million. We have no idea to do with it. We've got a treasury of stuff. We don't even know how to sell it. We have no idea.
So it's very difficult, right? So, we pay the artists in perpetuity if they're timepiece artists every 3 months. And this is where you could see that we're really early in this cycle, right? So you want to talk about, people could talk about very early, and I could talk about at length, what I think is the prohibitive factors of mass adoption. But when you get really in the weeds, every few months, I have to email OpenSea. I have to request a CSV file. I have to go through it manually and clean it up. And then I send it over to, our finance team, who then checks it. And then they distribute funds to the artists through an ETH transfer. And I mean, and to now it is 89 artists, right? And
well, there's some IP for you to build, right?
It is unbelievable what needs to be built in terms of the infrastructure of this ecosystem.
Yeah, and there's another opportunity for you. Mm-hmm. Knowing you see opportunity everywhere, but just doing that, distributing royalty payments essentially needs to be done.
I think much like you and much like many of the people who listen to Real Vision and enjoy sort of the content that you create, I wake up every morning, whether it's a bull market or a bear market, and all I see is opportunity. Right. You gave this amazing analogy earlier, and I want to throw it back to you for a second on a beach ball being held underwater. Right. That's how I feel Web3 is every day. Right. And, it, I know it. I'm willing to bet that every person who listens to you online and on Twitter and watches this knows it. Um, when you touch Web3, it's hard to ever go back. And the reason it's hard to ever go back is it's really fun. And the reason it's really fun is because everywhere you look, you see opportunity. And you just can't believe that it exists around you. And you can see how that opportunity taps into existing trend lines in society at the global level, at the macro level, and at the micro level, right? And like your analogy earlier, and I want to at one point during the conversation get back to it on this beach ball being held underwater is amazing because that's all I see every day is a beach ball underwater. I'm going
And
to start using it everywhere. Just
and it
I'll
is,
credit you, Raoul.
and if you think about it, what is the beach ball underwater is because air is lighter than water and it floats. But what that air is in this equation is the energy in the Web3 community, right? That energy is infectious, it's enjoyable, it's fun, there's opportunity, and you can't keep that down. So we've got this macro environment that's keeping it down right now, but that energy is just expanding. Since I spoke to you last, we've been in a bear market all the way through, yet you're building out all this stuff. I'm building out all this stuff, and everybody is. So the moment the liquidity environment changes that you and I were talking about off camera, is the beach ball explodes. Because you've introduced me to a few people, I've introduced you to some as well. People like Ticketmaster, right? Nobody even knows. They've distributed 10 million NFTs. I've got to know the Web3 team at Google, LinkedIn, Meta. I mean, at scale.
Look, you can go on to LinkedIn right now, and if you just go to if you search Web3 Amazon, Amazon has 40 job listings for Web3. If that doesn't send a signal that something is happening, I don't know what is. My favorite thing is this. I started my career at Wired in 2002, and I'll never forget that it was right after sort of like the dot-com implosion had taken place. Everything was being rebuilt. I'm watching the digital revolution being rebuilt. I'm right out of college and I'm super ignorant. And everyone is like, you were so cute thinking that this digital thing, that this internet thing would really work out. You're so cute thinking that I would ever want to order dog food online, right? It's like, well, last I checked, the biggest company in the world, Amazon, delivers dog food online to me, right? And so it's really funny how, what people look at with Web3 today, which is they look at, art and collectibles, and they think that that is the future of everything. And I think that art and collectibles is going to be an important area that's touched by Web3, the same way that music is, impacted by MP3s. But ultimately, the infrastructure, the efficiency of having a blockchain provide a single source of truth for brands to then build loyalty programs, reward programs, subscription programs, membership programs, that to me is what is amazing. And for anyone who looks at things through the lens of transparent and non-transparent organizations, efficient versus non-efficient organizations or structures, Web3 is a beautiful opportunity for providing efficiency and transparency over time from an infrastructure play.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. So that's the beach ball, right? That's why it's because you can feel the energy. It's not like it's a hidden energy. You can feel it. And, the moment that happens, it's going to get interesting. Right, let's move on a little bit to what the hell are you doing in television? And why didn't you tell me? Go on.
It's been public. We're in.
I can't keep up with your feed. You've got too much going on.
So if you look one day I had on my screen at home, right? This is my home office. I had the Robotos on the screen, and my daughter walked into my office and she said, "Whoa, what is that?" I said, "It's the Robotos." And she goes, I said, "What do you see?" And she said, "I see science and math." And I thought that was really interesting. She saw the Robotos and she saw science and math. And it got me thinking, wow, this great IP that is in the collectible realm and is 2D and flat really may have sort of an existence outside of that space. And Maria Perez Brown, who runs the kids division of Time Studios, lives about 20 blocks from me. And I said to her, meet me on the Upper West Side by Levan on 117th, right? I'm going to walk up to you. I go, and I'm going to explain something to you. And then I want you to explain something to me. And we went for this walk, and I explained to her what I was seeing in terms of IP creation in the Web3 space, right? There's no sort of barriers blocking sort of creation, communities being able to form around ideas. And then television shows, in my opinion, could be developed out of that, because a television show is far more complex to create. You need a story arc, you need a Bible, you need characters, you need it to be able to go for themes and seasons. And so what I wanted to understand from her was, okay, if I showed you great IP, could you take that great IP and turn it into television IP, right? And I started to walk her through the Robotos. I started to walk her through the Littles. I started to walk her through Toy Boogers and a few others. And she was totally game for it. And so I started to connect her with, all of the creators. And, we have a partnership with Toy Boogers, creator Doug. We have a partnership with Will Lee, the creator of the Littles. And we have a partnership with Pablo Stanley, the creator of the Robotos and Humankind, to create new IP that will be turned into television shows. And Nirvana out of Canada has gone into agreement with us to produce the Pablo Stanley and the Will Lee creative. And it's amazing. I cannot wait for people to see it. I'm so excited.
So where does blockchain and Web3 come into this one?
So what it comes into it is what I saw was the communities are already there rallying around great creative. And all we were saying was it's not that this is going to be television in a new sort of way. It's really going to be, we're looking for signals for great creative, original IP. And I think that the blockchain sends a signal that this is good creative and you should pay attention to it. Whereas in traditional structures, I don't think that those signals would ever come through. Like, can I give you a great mental exercise? It'll blow your mind. Okay.
Go on then.
Imagine if I pitched to you, okay? I'm going to pitch to you a business plan right now as Keith and Raoul. And I'm going to say to you, imagine if I dropped, and the numbers will be close, but they're not 100% accurate. So just bear with me, but they're close to what they really are in real life. But I said, imagine if I said to you, Raoul, listen, I have this crazy idea for this IP. I'm going to drop 5,000 tokens. It's going to have roughly 50% distribution on ownership. So people might own about 2, maybe a few more, right? Or less. I can assure you that people will be ravenous about it. People will come up with alternative narratives. People will create galas around it. People will turn it into folklore. People will talk about it every day. People will defend it like no other. They'll really have a sense of community. It will have very little overhead. It'll do about $25 million in secondary sales, and it'll probably make about $2 to $3 million in profit. Would you greenlight this business model for me? And you would say, of course. Okay. Now, let me give you sort of the non-Web3 approach to what I just pitched you. Okay. Imagine if I walked into a meeting and I said to you, Raoul, I have this crazy idea for IP, and we're going to call it crypto dick butts. Okay? Because that's what I just pitched you. Okay? You'd be like, and I explained it to you, you'd be like, Keith, get out of my office. There's no way I'm going to ever sort of greenlight that. Never, ever. Am I ever greenlighting that? But my point is this is like, what I like about this example, right, is with Web3, you have a very original palette to create from where communities can emerge. And look, not every community is going to be good. and not every community is going to be bad, right? But there's going to be communities that are going to emerge in Web3 that like I do think matter and that you should pay attention to. And in the traditional Hollywood world, there have been tremendous amount of gatekeepers, which is why you never see real originality coming out of Hollywood. You see remakes of things that, essentially we've seen a million times before. Thor #6, The Avengers #17, Spider-Man #18, right? Like Hollywood's not coming out with things as original as something like Crypto Dick Butts. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I think that Crypto Dick Butts actually represents the best of extreme creativity and the ability for a community to rally and form around it.
And
there you go. How do you like that? This is, I bet you're going down this path, right?
I didn't think we'd be talking Crypto Dick Butts, but it doesn't surprise me because it's you.
Right?
So,
but hold on. Let me ask you a question. What's the universal equation within the Crypto Dick Butt community if I was to throw it to you?
One dick equals one butt, obviously.
Well, there you go. You just looked at me like I was an idiot where you just said, obviously, right? But like there you just to a T proved my point. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, really a lot of this is, I presume, is your old boss, Kevin Kelly at Wired, right? It was his idea, the 1,000 True Fans. That was his famous essay. And this is what Crypto Dick Butts is. It's 1,000 true fans who will it into existence.
Yes. So can I show you something really cool?
Go on then.
This is fun. So only because you said Kevin Kelly, do you know he made this? Look at this. It's literally like an 80-pound book set of his photography going through Asia, right? And I have it over here. And the reason is I have a ton of Kevin Kelly books. Kevin Kelly, just if you don't know, was one of the founders of Wired. He was actually there before I was there. But I think that his writing is amongst the most influential in my thinking. Whether it's 1,000 True Fans or, he has a thesis of, no technology's ever been used for good that can't be used for bad, and vice versa. Or the future is ultimately defined by optimists, right? And I think his writing has really, left an indelible mark on my thinking.
Yeah, I totally agree. So with the TV idea, so you're tokenizing the IP and then taking it to TV and then looking for wherever this goes to. Is that what it is? Because I'm starting to see, obviously, you and I both know Ben Mesrich.
Love him.
Ben is doing this, and I just think it's the future of everything. And that's how you're doing it. You're raising capital within the blockchain space. How are you doing it?
So I think you're actually overcomplicating it. It's actually even easier than that. We're looking for signals, right? So is there a creator that has an unbelievably powerful audience?
Oh, Web3 creator, like Micah has, for example.
Like Micah, right? Like, is there a creator that has an unbelievable sort of following, an audience, a signal, right? And how can we build off of that community sort of dedication to create original IP?
Got it. Okay, let's talk about the other part of what you've been looking at as well, the B2B side as well. Sure. Because you're not doing enough, Keith. So you're a slacker. That's what I've always said.
That's part of Web3, right? It's always changing. So, like what we saw with timepieces was, while it's an amazing consumer extension, it's also an amazing insights engine for us, right? And it gives us an idea as to, in real time, how is sort of the world evolving in Web3. And the reality of the world in Web3 is that it evolves very, very, very fast. So things that worked 3 months ago don't work today, right? Things that engaged 3 months ago don't engage today. And, timepieces, because we, have it staffed up and we have a great team and it's really focused on it, timepieces is constantly sort of looking at how are we continuing to ensure high engagement amongst our community. And then how can we take that engagement and how can we take that, the management, and turn it into insights and learnings that we can help other brands and organizations enter into Web3. And that was my thesis to, Mayor Suarez, right? Which was, cities are increasingly challenged to find new revenue streams. And, they're also increasingly challenged to find new relationships with their, constituency. And, what better way to do that than to create not a community in the traditional sense, because no city could ever manage a community the way that like a private brand could manage it, but rather how could you create a sort of a utility token that could generate revenue? And we're very fortunate that I'm friends and close friends with Raja over at Mastercard, who's amazing. And I called him up and I said, how would you feel if we created tokens for the city of Miami that ultimately gave access into Mastercard's priceless Miami program, which is one of their most successful programs, and then also went to the team at Salesforce, who we're very close with, and I sit on the Web3 advisory board for them, and said, we can't necessarily build all the infrastructure for a city. You can. So how can you do the back end for everything? And we'll manage the front end, the strategy, the relationships with the artists, how we go to market. And Mastercard will do the utility, and ultimately, you as Salesforce will do the sort of back end. That was one example. The other example that's public is Galaxy Digital, right? Mike has been incredibly supportive of the Web3 ecosystem through Galaxy Digital and the investments that they've made in it. And he wanted to make sure that that the ecosystem saw that like he was participating in it, right? And so he created essentially what is a loyalty token for members within the Galaxy Digital family. And what we did was we looked at their logo and we auto-generated the logo into 3,210 unique sort of varieties. And then we partnered with 3 timepiece artists, right? And we asked the artists, will you create generative art that would equally be unique? So every piece was completely a unique piece unto itself. And ultimately, we allowed sort of the community to gather it through just a drop, an airdrop, not a mint. So that way they could sort of gain access into the Galaxy sort of ecosystem. And I think the things that people don't see, and this is the other thing, is we consistently are advising companies on how to enter into Web3 and to think about sort of the bigger play of Web3. And some of those are public and some of those are not public.
Amazing. I'm going to tell you a story because you'll like this. So I get invited by David Pemps, my co-founder of Science Magic Studios, to go to London, and he introduced me to the chairman of Saatchi & Saatchi. And I go in and he says, like, I want you to present to the marketing group of Great Britain. It is all the CMOs of everybody, including the kind of US firms who have the big, UK HQs. And it's a black tie at Claridge's and it's a bit stuffy, but I want you to shake them up a bit and, tell them about Web3. So I'm like, sure. I've done plenty of presenting in my time and I was not concerned. So I go to Claridge's, beautiful place, in my black tie. To go out and buy myself a black tie because I'm in jeans and t-shirt world these days. And so I'm already feeling slightly like this is weird because I've not dressed like this for a while. So I sit down and present, and I do it in the kind of round and let people ask questions as we go. And it turned hostile. One woman stood up and said, this is a scam. This is like CDOs. This is like 2008. You're going to blow up this is a scam. How dare you do this? And about 25% of the room, these are the most senior marketing people in Europe, stood up and applauded. I was like, wow. And it was the fear of change that was coming, because these people were the survivors. They're all white people in their 50s and 60s. And these were the people who had survived the internet. Mm-hmm. And they thought they'd won the battle. And now the new battle is coming and they're shitting themselves.
So can I give you, I love this story. Can I give you like
I was shocked, by the way. I've never been shocked at an audience, but go on, carry on.
I love that people have such strong opinions over a technology. Okay, that's all it is, right? It's just a token that verifies ownership on a blockchain, right? And yet it's somehow become politicized and confused and distorted. But I'll give you here's what I do on my free time because I'm such an exciting individual. Like literally, Raoul, here are my two beverages of consumption. Okay, seltzer and coffee.
Yeah,
Right, like
LaCroix, LaCroix, and just
great taste. Okay, so like I don't have a hobby. I read. That's my hobby. Or I like to work. I actually love working. And Web3 is a wonderful space for insomniac workaholics. Okay. And what I will say is over the summer, I had a moment where I just said, okay, I want to see something for myself. I don't want to Google it. I want to see it for myself. And I went into the Fortune archives and I Googled Fortune 100 1992, right? And I looked at the top 100 companies that were listed on the Fortune 100 in 1992. And the reason I chose that was Wired was founded in 93. So I felt that 92 was the beginning of Web 1, right? And I was like, who are those companies? And I did it. I have a spreadsheet and it's on my computer. I could send it to you if you want to get it afterwards. Okay.
I'd like to see it. Yeah.
Who are the companies? And then I said, okay, 10 years goes by, right? So I just said arbitrarily, let's go, 1 decade goes by. What's the Fortune 100 look like in 2002, right? So I can't control the fact 2002 is actually like .com has imploded. So like everything's happened. And what I found, and these are rough numbers, but they're illustrative, but they're true. What I found was 10 years after Web 1 began, roughly 75% of the companies that were on the Fortune 100 in 1992 were not on the Fortune 100 in 2002. And of the 25% that were, 85% were lower than where they were a decade earlier. Okay. So then I said, okay, that's interesting. Let's look at Web 2, right? So Web 2, I said, in my mind, I was like, it started in 2007. That's really when Web 2 really took off. And I'm like, okay, so who were the Fortune 100 in 2007 and who were they in 2017? And 10 years later, roughly the same thing was held true. 75% of the companies roughly were no longer on the Fortune 100. And of the 25% that were, instead of the 85% going down, the 85% actually went up. So they learned this time. A very small percentage learned. So now I ask, like, you're in this room and we're 2 years into what I would say is Web3, right? And Web3, I'd say probably starts roughly in 2020. And the question I would ask is, do you really want to be on the opposing side of this bet with me? That in 8 years from now, you're going to be one of the companies that A, is going to still be on the Fortune 100. And then B, if you are, you'll be up versus down, right? And I think that what I see is two things. One is the first time that this technological revolution took place, it caught a lot of people off guard and it reset a lot. The second time it took place, it caught a lot of people off guard, but a small percentage actually paid attention and played it right. The third time it's going to take place in our life, I think it's still going to catch a lot of people off guard, right? And it's going to be interesting who actually comes to the table and who doesn't. The company that doesn't surprise me more than any other company, Starbucks, right? Starbucks is the first brand to really jump into Web3 at the mass level with, their loyalty program with the Odyssey. But when I was at Bloomberg, we used to use this tool on the terminal to scrape their quarterly reports. And I could have told you every single time, because we went out as a sales team and showed this, that Starbucks used the word mobile 5 times as much as their competitive set, right? For years. And lo and behold, who has the best mobile app in retail? Starbucks, I would argue, has one of the best mobile apps in retail. Like, look at where their revenues derived from. Like, Starbucks is a really progressive, excellent sort of thinking and positioned organization for leading other companies into sort of seeing what's possible. Like, they take a lot of risks first. The other thing I know, and I think you know this to be true too, is, you know, every company is a Lipitor ad, right? And what I mean by that is like every company looks amazing on the outside, right? But has issues on the inside. And like, I don't care who you are listening to this podcast, right? Think about any company that you admire, and I could show you every flaw inside the company. Okay, like every company. It's true, and it's because people are involved, right? Everyone wants to think that that business would be so easy if people weren't involved, right? If it was everything was automated, but because people are involved, things become irrational, and because things become irrational, every company is a libertarian. That is my philosophy on life. Okay, that on business at least, and for real, right? Like and what we know is books like The Innovator's Dilemma wouldn't come out and wouldn't be so successful if they didn't hit on something that was really true. And what we know is true here is A, the technology that Web3 provides is actually cheaper than the alternatives, right? And that's scary for a lot of people, and people will sort of resist where they can. But B, we're in a weird economic environment. I mean, you are the pro on this one. Like, you know this better than I. All I know is one simple truth, which is no company enters into a recession and leaves a recession looking the same way, right? I don't care which way they look. They just look different, right? And oftentimes they're disrupted. And I think that what a lot of people worry about with Web3 adoption is if we're going to enter into this world where like there's a lot of economic uncertainty and change taking place, are we going to be able to figure out how to evolve our strategy to adopt to Web3 when like in some instances it's hard to adopt to even Web2, right? And keep it going on Web2. And I think that what you saw there more than anything else is fear, right? But what I love about your story is I'd rather have love or hate than indifference, right? If you gave that speech and everyone was like, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Raoul. Have a great day, right?
It's the worst.
Like,
it's the worst.
I would be like, I'd rather never have traveled and never have done that. But I'm willing to bet that the woman who stood up and said it's a scam and screamed at you, you know, either she will own that for the rest of her life or she'll like find herself and her opinions being challenged and slowly over time realize, whoa, I don't know why I need to have such a strong opinion against a technology. Let me see how I can think about how this technology can activate marketing or the company better.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot there. And what is interesting, and you raised upon a point, and you've been an eye-opener for me in this, and I think we've both been through the same journey where random people tap us on the shoulder and say, hey, listen, can I have a chat? And it's the biggest companies in the world.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, they get this earlier than you would imagine because they learned from the last time around. So I don't know who's going to be the survivor, but Google know. I've just come off a call with Google now. They know that they're going to have to give up the ad model at some point. It's just a matter of managing it. And Mark Zuckerberg's being punished for this, but he knows what he's got to do. Mm-hmm. Whether he pulls it off or not, it's a different matter. But it's really interesting to see. I mean, because you're there and whatever you can publicly disclose, but Salesforce, how are they thinking about this?
Well, I mean, I'm friends with them, right?
That's
like,
right.
So like
you advise them a bit, and you're, obviously the same owner.
You know, I think that I love that team. I think that, you know.
But what are they thinking about? That they want to provide the architecture so businesses can operate in this world, or?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when they built the Salesforce NFT Cloud, the Salesforce NFT Cloud was really how do you enable a company to ultimately mint and then enter into the ecosystem to create a token. And then I think one of the most important aspects is thinking about what's the future of CRM, right? And, you know, this is my opinion more than Salesforce's opinion because like I do not work there and you know, I talk to them quite a bit, but you know, what people don't think about in terms of Web 2 versus Web 3 is it really comes down to choice, right? In Web 2, you're a renter. And in Web 3, you have the choice. Do I want to be a renter or would I like the option to be an owner, right? Web 2, you don't have that choice. In Web 2, you don't control your privacy, but in Web 3, you have a choice. Do I want to not control my privacy or do I want to control my privacy, my personal information? And I think that when you all of a sudden enter in that choice, right? Do I want to be an owner? Do I want to be a renter? Do I want to control my privacy or do I want to just have my personal information extracted, which is what happens when you're on Facebook or, Instagram. When you open up that choice, it opens up an entire new model for what does CRM management look like, right? And when you think about, what their model is, I think that they're an incredible organization that's set up to have essentially a membrane around the entire world as it relates to existing CRM structure of known consumers, right? But there's going to be an entire new moment of consumers that are unknown in terms of personal information. Like, I don't know it's you, Raoul, or me, Keith. I only know a wallet address, but there's still a lot of information and insights to be gleaned off of those individuals. And by the way, there are moments where it's not that these individuals want to remain anonymous. It's that these individuals want the choice of volunteering their anonymity as opposed to being told, like, just because you come onto Instagram, now all of a sudden Facebook knows everything you're doing, right? And who you are. And you need to have that structure in place to be able to capture that moment where the consumer says, I give you my consent, right? Like, I want to give you my consent. And so I think that the rise of Web3 creates an entirely new CRM relationship for companies and brands and consumers. And people who challenge me on, well, people want to remain anonymous in Web3, like, I actually don't believe that's true. I think that consumers want to control their anonymity. And here's two examples I would point to. Last year at Time, we said to our community, we have 5 tickets to the Time Person of the Year. If you would like to attend, you have to tell us who you are and you have to take a PCR test. And thousands of people volunteered their information. And you could say, well, that's Time and you've built a community around that, right? And so I'd say, well, that's great. Well, let me give you a much larger example. Twitter said, if you give me $3 a month, I will verify your identity to your wallet and give you a hexagonal sort of PFP. And they essentially created the world's largest doxing of wallets, unknown addresses to identities, right? Like, hopefully the IRS is giving them a tax break, right? But all kidding aside, like what you saw there really, and without joking, is you saw the consumer saying, the individual saying, wow, I love that Twitter's allowing me to do this. I want to do this. Here's my $3. Now let me verify that I own this NFT, right? And I think that that choice is a huge, huge, huge advantage to lean into for any company, especially in a world where you're seeing a rise in GDPR, CCPA, the sunsetting of third-party cookies. They all know that this business model is going to change.
Also, what's really interesting, if you think about the example that you gave earlier, is there's a value exchange. I will release my anonymity in exchange for value, right? Right now, you don't get it and they monetize it. So Google monetizes it or Facebook monetizes it. But in your example of the tickets, it's like, well, you release your anonymity and in exchange you get a chance to get a ticket. If you want to take that trade, you can. And if you don't, you don't. But you're exchanging value for your identity, which I think is a massive breakthrough because we can all get paid for using our identity. It'd be a nice passive
100%.
income.
And what people don't realize is in Web 2, your identity is extractive, right? Like, I go onto Twitter, I go onto Instagram, I go onto LinkedIn. I am able to build who I am in return for who I am, right?
Correct.
And
you sell your whole soul.
Right. And in Web 3, you might not give who you are, but you're able to build an identity. And there's still a lot of information that comes off of that, right? But it's different information. And it's just different insight patterns that you have to start to look for. And then if ultimately you want to sort of connect the individual to their identity, you have to give the consumer a reason. You have to give them that choice to volunteer it. And I think that that's nice. That's nice.
So, final question, because we've already gone through an hour, and we could do this for 3 hours, you and I.
I love our time together, Raoul. You know
I
that.
know. I've got to come to New York. We've got to go to properly have dinner and sit down for multiple hours. But
By the way, for everyone who is listening in on this, the second I saw Raoul for the first time ever at the SALT conference, I like ran over and gave him a huge hug. Right?
Yeah.
It was just amazing.
it was a big hug fest.
It's totally
Right. My final question for you. If there's a business that should tokenize that hasn't done it, what would it be? Here's mine, just to give you the example. I think Peloton. If you want to turn that business around, think of all the competition amongst the cyclists. Think of the creators who are creating the stuff. Think of what it could do to Peloton to completely turn it around from which right now is a scary economic system. So that's mine. What's yours?
I love that. So I'm obsessed with what NFTs and this technology can do for rewards and loyalty programs and membership, right? So if I was to think about the industries that I think could be revolutionized the most quickest, I would say the ones that blow my mind are.
Give me one company. I don't want broad brushstrokes.
You don't broad. Okay.
No, I want one company you think these guys, if they do this, it's a game changer.
Marriott Bonvoy, right? If they tokenized their loyalty program, I think it would be game changer. If I could give an industry, I think the airlines and their loyalty programs, if they tokenize their loyalty programs, right now, all of us are held hostage to their loyalty programs as renters. And
they're massively inflationary, so they get devalued.
Yep. And so if they all of a sudden turned it over into an ownership program where I didn't have to earn my way up to platinum or diamond status, but I could buy it, or if I earned it, I could sell it, I think it would be unbelievably game-changing for all of them. And I think that people would have a completely different relationship with these organizations.
And one more thing to add to that, I think all of their tickets, airline tickets and hotel rooms, should be NFTs. So 100%. Then when I go to New York and I suddenly have to cancel at the last minute, I've got a secondary marketplace. The hotel loves it because at least somebody's using the room and buying dinner and whatever. I get to release some of the value from it. And as a buyer, you're getting discounted stuff. Everybody's a winner. Same for airline tickets.
I mean, you brought up in the beginning, and I think it's the most fascinating, is Ticketmaster has dropped 10 million NFTs and nobody's talking about it. And, a great example, and a huge kudos to him with his Gary Vaynerchuk and VFriends and VCon. He took a ticket that devalued down to zero, and at VCon announced a partnership with Snoop Dogg, and then said, oh, by the way, if you have this ticket that the NFT is actually now worth zero, I'm now updating the metadata and it's now worth something because it's dialed into the Snoop Dogg partnership. And, you have an entire industry that essentially their product goes to zero upon usage that all of a sudden can find itself rethinking its relationship with consumers and value, right? And I think that is unbelievable.
Love that. Keith, amazing conversation as ever. And it's left us at least another couple of hours of conversation to have at some point. But look, brilliant. I'm always inspired by all the things you're doing, how fast you're moving, and it's always fun to chat.
Well, the feeling is mutual, my friend, and I love what you all are building over at Real Vision. And, anytime you invite me, I will always take it. Thank you for having me on today.
You're going to do an interview for us as well, aren't you?
I am. Am I doing it with you?
No, you're doing it on your own, unaided by Safety Net.
Oh, I love this. Okay, yes. And can I plug it?
Yeah, of course you can.
With Kira Byrne at Condé Nast, who I think is just an absolutely incredible mind who never beats her chest on the incredible stuff that she's doing, and who I have just an unbelievable amount of respect for, and I've known for over 10 years. And so I can't wait to...
Bizarrely enough, I know her as well. So it's fantastic. Keith, brilliant. Good to see you, my friend.
Have a great one.
My key takeaways from an interview with Keith are A, I don't know how he finds the time to do everything he does, and that's the world of Web3. There's so much going on, so much opportunity. I think that was a really important point, that he gets excited because of the amount of opportunity, because everything is getting disrupted. Now, you hear those flippant comments of everything's being disrupted, but Keith goes through concrete examples of how the TV industry is being disrupted, what's happening at Salesforce, what's happening at the mega brands, how he's seeing loyalty points at Starbucks, who's the innovators, how the innovation world works. So there is so much to learn from what he's doing. And also the transparency with which he conducts his business at time, because it's all on blockchain, is again an inspiration for how things should be done. So I think Keith is somebody to always follow. Follow him on Twitter, get involved in the Time community. I own one of the Time Akkus. And also just listen to what he says, because he's telling you the future. And if you listen hard enough, you'll know where it's going.
Hey visionaries, thank you for tuning in. For more free crypto content like this, head over to realvision.com/crypto. You'll get early access to the most brilliant minds in the space to cut through the noise, get in-depth analysis, and get you ahead of the curve with unbiased insights.